Good morning. Our first witnesses this morning are Colin and Janet, are they?
Yes, sir.
Colin and Janet, please.
Please state your full name.
Janet Smith.
Take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth.
truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Please state your full name.
Colin John Smith.
Take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty
I
God
swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole
the
truth,
whole truth,
and nothing but
and
the
nothing but the truth.
Janet and Colin, you're here to talk about your late son, Colin.
Yeah.
And we've got a photo of Colin we're going to display on the screen. Paul, it's 1523005. And I understand this is one of your favourite photos of Colin.
Yes, it is.
And we'll keep that up other than when we've got documents to display. So Colin was born in 1982,
Yeah.
and he was the youngest of your four sons.
Yes, he was.
When he was about 4 months old, he was diagnosed with haemophilia A. How did that come about, Janet?
It was through my sister, actually. I was changing his nappy and she saw a tiny bruise on his knee and she said, that's a haemophiliac bruise. She knew straight away and we got him tested and that's how we found out that he had severe haemophilia.
And his care was transferred, his haemophilia care, from the Royal Gwent Hospital, which was your more local hospital, to the Heath Hospital in Cardiff,
Yes, it
under the
was.
care of Professor Bloom.
Yes.
We're going to look at a handful of notes from Colin's medical records,
Okay.
which I know you've seen. Paul, could we have up on screen, please, 1523002? We can see this is dated the 21st of July 1983. So Colin would have been about a year old at this time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can see the consultant is identified as Professor Bloom. And the first line of the clinical note says this: known haemophiliac, not treated. And then, Paul, if we go down towards the bottom of the page, please. We can see there, just before the bottom, where it says drugs nil, never given 8 concentrate or cryo. So at that time, when Colin was seen by Professor Bloom, he was identified as a child who'd never been given any form of treatment for his
That's right.
haemophilia.
Yeah.
May I just ask, if we go back to the top of the page, the underlining under not treated is original, is it?
We only have photocopies, and it's in the photocopy. I don't know whether, Colin, you know, because you looked at your son's records at the time. Is that underlining that's been added subsequently, do you know, or is that in the original?
No, I think that's the original.
Thank you.
Now, that was the 21st of July. The nursing records show that Colin was given factor 8 concentrate for the first time by a doctor the very next day,
Okay.
the 22nd of July, 1983. And then we're going to look at one further document. It's 1523003. And we'll see it's a letter from Professor Bloom dated the 3rd of August 1983. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. It was addressed to your GP, and it says this: I saw Colin in the clinic again this week. I understand that he turned up in the paediatric ward about a week ago, having fallen down and hit the back of his head. He received an intravenous injection of 1 bottle of 250 units of factor 8 concentrate and made an uneventful recovery without any evidence of intracranial bleeding. The concentrate which we used was prepared from British blood from the Lister Institute. However, All these materials carry the risk of hepatitis, particularly non-A, non-B, but this is something that haemophiliacs have to accept. Were you told, either of you, by Professor Bloom or any of the other treating doctors or clinicians at the time, that there was a risk to Colin of developing non-A, non-B hepatitis?
No, absolutely not.
We're going to look at another document I know you've seen shortly before coming in this morning. Paul, it's 1523007, please. Now, this is a document dated the 24th of June 1983, so it's roughly a month before that entry that we looked at, and roughly a month before Colin received his first treatment. If we just look at them at first, please, Paul, at the second page, so we can see who this is from. It's from Professor Bloom in his capacity as chairman of the Haemophilia Centre Directors Organisation, and Dr. Ritzer, who was secretary to the same organisation. And if we go back to the first page, please, Paul. We can see that the letter is headed Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome, in other words, AIDS. And it says this: a meeting of reference centre directors was held on May the 13th, 1983, to discuss this problem in haemophilia, its implications and our recommendations. So far, one possible case has been reported to our organisation. This patient conforms to the definition published, thank you, sir, by the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, but cannot be considered as a definite case. We're not aware of any other definite patients amongst the UK haemophilia population. At the above-mentioned meeting on May the 13th, the following general recommendations were agreed. 1. For mildly affected patients with haemophilia A or von Willebrand's disease and minor lesions, treatment with DDAVP should be considered. Because of the increased risk of transmitting hepatitis by means of large pool concentrates in such patients, this is in any case the usual practice of many directors. And then this: for treatment of children and mildly affected patients or patients unexposed to imported concentrates, many directors already reserve supplies of NHS concentrates, brackets cryoprecipitate or freeze-dried, and it would be circumspect to continue this policy. Was anything from that, any reference to any possible risk of AIDS, communicated to you as Colin's parents?
No, nothing at all, nothing.
Were you told anything about any risks associated with the use of the Factor VIII product?
No, nothing at all.
Were you told anything about differences between NHS products or American products?
It was never spoken about. We just believed the doctor. You know, they were treating Colin, and it sounds terrible, but he was like a god to us, Prof. Bloom, because he was looking after my son. So why would I ask any questions about it? We thought he was getting the best treatment possible.
Now, the August 1983 letter to your GP that we looked at referred to British products having been used to treat Colin on that first occasion. But we're going to look at one further document. Paul, it's 1523006. And these are treatment records for Colin. And we can see that a month after that first treatment that we've discussed, on the 22nd of August 1983, Colin was treated with cryobulin, a commercial product. He was treated again with cryobulin the following month, on the 19th of September 1983. We then see a treatment record for the following year, Elstree, that's the British product. And then we see, possibly 12th of June 1984, it's not clear, what looks like Armour, another commercial product, and then Elstree products. Can you recall any discussion with you at all about using these commercial products instead of NHS products?
No, not at all.
As far as we were aware, it was all the same product.
You have both expressed the views in your witness statements that Colin was regarded by Professor Bloom as a previously untreated patient, which, as a matter of fact, he was in July 1983, and that he was deliberately treated with factor VIII for the purpose of research. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've described him, Colin, in your statement as an easy target.
I believe he
mean by
was,
that?
yeah. He was just unlucky enough to be diagnosed with haemophilia at the same time scale as these trials were starting.
You've also referred, Colin, in your statement to your recollection that blood samples would very frequently be taken from Colin.
Yeah, almost every time we went to the centre, they take blood. They never explained why, they just said they're checking his blood count.
And you've said this in your statement, Colin. There was a letter in Colin's medical records stating that the hospital were unable to send any more blood samples as the family have withdrawn the patient. You've assumed that that was a letter sent to pharmaceutical companies, and you've a recollection of seeing it in 1989. But when you've looked at Colin's records more recently, you cannot find that letter.
Yeah, I did see it as I was walking between the wards. They gave us his records to carry. So being nosy, I did have a look. And that was just after we'd decided that we'd take Colin from the hospital.
Paul, we can have the photo back now, thank you. You've also described in your statement, both of you, the impression that you had that Professor Bloom was very keen for Colin to transfer to his care. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
And what gave rise to that impression?
He just said they had the proper unit there, haemophilia unit, and it was the best care that you could get.
Now, Colin continued to receive factor VIII, as we've seen from those records. He also, however, as his records show, received cryoprecipitate on a number of occasions.
Yes, he did.
Was there ever any discussion with either of you about why cryoprecipitate on one occasion, why factor VIII on another?
Nothing at all.
How did you learn that Colin had been infected with HIV?
He was about 2.5. He was in hospital because he had a bad chest, and Prof Bloom came down to see him and then called us out and just told us that he's HIV in the corridor with children running around and other parents. But it still didn't comprehend what that meant to us because it had never been discussed. Nobody had told us what HIV was, or, we just thought, oh, okay, and we just went back into Colin's. I was very distressed, I don't know why, and then Prof found out about it, and he actually came back down and took us into a room, but the damage had already been done. He told us in the corridor.
And what do you recall about that, Colin?
Well, we would still come to terms with the fact that haemophilia, there's no record of it in the family. We'd only just learned about that then. He says HIV, he's one of the unlucky few, which we assumed as 1 or 2 cases. But as it turns out, there's thousands.
Were you given any information either at that stage or over the following weeks or months about the nature of the condition or what course it might take?
No. The only thing that really sort of stood out was Colin being Colin. He used to sleep in with his brother. They had bunk beds, but always, you know what kids are like, they're just getting together. And he had a severe nosebleed. And I phoned the hospital and they just said, did Daniel get any blood on him? And I said no. And he said, leave Colin, let him bleed, it doesn't matter. Get Colin, clean him, bring him down and throw his mattress away. Just burn his mattress. And that's, I suppose, when we realised how serious this was.
And you've also described in your statements how the awareness of how serious it was came not from the doctors, but from seeing adverts on TV.
Oh, those adverts were devastating. They destroyed a lot of people. We started getting AIDS dead writ on the house, not little letters, 6-foot letters on the side of the house, crosses in the door, car vandalised, people going across the street from us, threatening to take their children out of school if Colin went there. It was devastating.
There is no, in the medical records that we have, there's no HIV or HTLV3, as it would then have been called, test. and there's no record of any communication to you by Professor Bloom of the diagnosis. What's your best estimate of when it was that you were given this information in the corridor in the way you've described?
We assumed he was about 2, but actually after Colin passed, we asked when he was infected, and he said it could have been his first treatment. And that's all the information we had on that.
And your statement suggests that this conversation took place when he was about 2, which would have been 1984 or thereabouts?
Yeah.
Had you known before that conversation that Colin was even being tested for HTLV3?
No, we took Colin to the hospital on good faith. We trusted that doctor. We trusted people to look after our son. And no, they're just testing him all the time.
How did Colin's infection affect him in the early years after 1984, 1985?
He wasn't too bad to start with. You get the occasional cold, which would linger a little bit longer than normal. But other than that, he carried on as normal. Colin was Colin. He just went around the house destroying stuff.
I mean, the other kids, they knew if he cut himself or anything, they just classed him as having special blood. Not because of the haemophilia, nothing else. And, they'd just come to us and say, Mum, Colin's got special blood. And they knew not to touch him and we never had to. They were only kids themselves. I didn't want to put that pressure on them of knowing that Colin was HIV.
In 1988 or thereabouts, Colin started to receive treatment with AZT.
Yeah.
What can you recall being told about the AZT by Professor
Wonder
Bloom?
drug. That's what he told me it was a wonder drug. And he wouldn't be able to start it because they need to send away for it. But it could save his life. And it didn't, did it? And, I can remember going to a meeting and somebody just pointed a finger at me and said, get him off it, you're killing him. And I think they were right.
Did you raise those concerns with Professor Bloom?
No.
He told you that this was the right...
He told me it'd save his life, it was a wonder drug, is what he told me.
And you've said in your statements you trusted what Professor Bloom said to you?
Of course I did. Of course I did. He's looking after my boy.
By the time that Colin started on AZT in 1988, had his health been deteriorating?
Yes. Yes. He lost a lot of weight, kept getting bad chest. But, we took him to the hospital with bad chest and I said to Prof that, he was complaining of chest pains and he just looked at me, smiled and said he's got a good imagination, that kid. And that's what he told me. And he had pneumonia twice. But we never ever told that. We only saw that when it was in his records.
And you've also seen in his records, I think, a reference to suspected meningitis, which was also not shared.
Never told nothing.
What was the effect of Colin's health on his schooling?
He didn't go to school very much. He missed a lot of school.
We couldn't actually get him into school unless he had a private nurse, because parents were threatening to withdraw their children.
I mean, he loved school. He did love school and he had such beautiful friends there, and it's just a shame parents weren't like that, with the abuse that we had. But he loved school, but he became too ill to go, really. I mean, sometimes he'd just say, I think I want to go to school today, and we'd put him in a wheelchair, wrap him up, and we'd get him literally to the door, and then he'd say, I want to go home now.
Now, the time came when Colin had to spend more time in hospital.
Yeah.
He would suffer frequent chest infections. Colin, I think you used to take him to hospital. You drove him to hospital. And
Yes,
sometimes if you were running late, you'd play a game with Colin. What was that?
Well, we played lots of games. His favourite was counting different coloured cars. His best hobby, he loved driving. So we sit in car park, he'd drive around on my lap. He'd do the steering, I'd do the pedals. But we got stopped one night by the police going to the hospital, and they gave us an escort, and my car blew up on the way home because they went faster than I did. But he loved life. often went to the hospital just to make sure it was still there. That's how trusting he was. You know, he was ill. He'd want to see the doctors. He'd walk in and see the doctors on the ward and say, okay, you can take me home now. Didn't want treatment. He just wanted to see him.
And you've described in your statements what a brave boy he was.
Oh, he was.
He never asked what was wrong.
No,
He never complained.
no, never.
He never asked if he was going to be okay.
No.
But you think he knew ultimately that he was going to die.
He started to sort of, I mean, he loved drawing. He adored drawing. But he started to draw like crosses, headstones. He'd only use black and things like that. And I can remember because my mum died not long before him, and we were going to the cemetery and I was crying, and he just looked at me and said, Mummy, why are you crying? You're selfish. He said, you don't cry. He said, you know where she is. And for a 6-year-old to say that, well, it just gobsmacked me.
And you've recounted in your statement that after a row with his brother, he said, you're going to miss me when I'm gone.
Yeah, he
and
did.
You can have all my toys.
You can have my toys. Yeah, he did.
You, as Colin spent more time in hospital, you didn't want to leave him there alone, so one of you would be there. And you said in your statement that that obviously had an impact upon your ability to be there for your other 3
did.
boys. They spent a lot of time with other family members at this stage.
Family
Yeah.
and friends, yeah, they day to day. They just didn't know where they were. Well, we
You know,
spent-
they lost really, you know, when Colin, because we wouldn't leave him, they lost their mummy and daddy too. Yeah, the kids. Because we weren't there.
Now, you tried to keep Colin's infection private,
Yeah.
but because of what was in the news
Oh,
and
yeah.
about haemophilia and AIDS and what was known locally, people put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
And you suffered a lot of abuse.
Oh, we did. Yeah.
What can you recall about that, Colin?
Well, I made a mistake. I had to tell the family. Told a friend, next to me, no, everybody knew. So I got up one morning and there was AIDS dead written across the side of the house in good 6-foot letters. So I'm painting that out. The following day there was AIDS dead scratching at the front door with a big cross. And it was dark at the time, I remember, and I was painting the door in the dark, and the boys come out and that's what I was doing. So I just said, your mum didn't like the colour. And they accepted that. But then there was AIDS dead scratched in the car. Constant phone calls, day and night. He should be put down, put on an island. He shouldn't be allowed to sleep with his brothers. You know. It just went on and on. We stuck it as long as we could. But before I'd done something silly, if I phoned somebody, we decided to move, which is what we did.
You've also described how you lost friends. Parents didn't want their children playing.
No. And, you know, I think, you know, we had that all the time, but I think the worst one was Colin's godmother. She had a little girl, and she used to come to our house, and then she didn't come anymore because she didn't want her daughter playing with Colin, and that was his godmother.
And you had a member of your family, Colin, who insisted on separate cutlery.
Yeah, she turned up one day with a knife and fork and a cup and a plate and said, these are Colin's, special not to touch them. And I don't think I've spoken to her since, actually.
You also had people not wanting the children to go to the same school as Colin and his brother.
Oh, they threatened to take... if Colin went to that school, they threatened to take them out. But the teachers were amazing. They said, well, you carry on because he's coming to this school. They were very, very good.
And you've explained in your statement how you were known locally as the
AIDS family, yeah, for a long time.
And your other boys were bullied at school. You didn't know at the time because they wanted to protect you,
Yeah.
but they were called things like AIDS kids.
Yeah.
We didn't find that out till they were adults. Just told us one day.
They had a lot of abuse.
What was the effect on your employment, Colin?
I lost my job because the boss was scared of people finding out and losing customers. So within a week, I got another job. I thought I'd take a night shift job. nobody around, nobody know me, but the day I was going to start, he called me into office, said he couldn't start me. So from that point on, I was basically unemployable. I went to the job centre, they wouldn't let me sign on. They just paid me my benefits. And that was it until Colin died. I informed them that Colin had died. Within just over a week, I'd had a letter saying get a job. So that was the thought of them as well, you know.
There came a point when Colin was very ill. He'd been in hospital and you decided you wanted to take him home. Can you tell us about that, Janet?
It was 19th of December, and Prof wanted to stay in hospital, and we said, no, we're taking him home. Well, it was just before that, and then we gave Prof the 19th of December. We'd taken him out, whatever, and Prof went mad because he said that he's got to die in hospital. That was the first time we sort of realised how ill he was. Has to die in hospital because there's no undertakers that will take an AIDS patient. That's what he told us. And we said, well, whatever, but he's coming out on the 19th. And that morning, Prof came down with a Christmas tree for his room, and I just said, you can stick that. And we just picked him up, undone his drips, and took him home.
Until that conversation, had you been told that Colin was effectively dying?
No. No.
So that was...
It came to us about, I think Colin was about 5, wasn't he? And he said he's full-blown AIDS. And still we didn't realise, because it was never explained to us. Prof never sat down and talked to us about it or what was going to happen or anything like that. We were left to our own devices, really, because it was never sort of, it was just a matter-of-fact thing.
So you learned essentially for the first time that your 7-year-old son was dying.
Yeah.
When the professor told you that you couldn't take him home because he had to die in hospital.
Yeah.
I'm going to, with your agreement, just read a few paragraphs from your son Daniel's
Yeah,
witness
that's fine.
statement, where Daniel talks about Colin
Yeah.
and his understanding as a brother close in age to Colin of how Colin felt at the time. Daniel said this: Colin knew he was dying. I slept in the Heath Hospital with him during the last year of his life. He spent the whole time there. He had a room which was decorated with cards from friends and toys. I remember playing with Lego and we got into an argument. I said to him, I will break your Lego, and he said, do not do that. You will miss me when I'm gone. He lost a tremendous amount of weight and had to be wrapped up in sheet blankets. He spent his time from the age of 5 to 6 at home. If he was having a good day when he was 5 or 6, he would go to school in his wheelchair, as he loved school.
Yeah, he did.
Other children loved him in school, which I also attended. They knew he was very poorly, but did not know about the AIDS. He picked up infections very regularly and was admitted to hospital around the age of 6. My grandmother passed away 6 months before Colin. He mentioned that he was not scared of death. He said he knew he was going to see her, and she passed away to be there for him and did not want to suffer any more pain. He was very weak and could not move. He had to be given a potty at the age of 7. He was permanently on the drip. He was in a lot of pain even when he was sitting down, and at that time he was very frail. As a child, I did not know what HIV was. I was too young. I thought it was a name for his special blood. A week before the Christmas, my parents demanded that Colin came home because they knew this would be his last Christmas. My parents bought him everything he wanted that Christmas.
Yeah, bike.
I was confused. I did not know how he was going to die and did not understand it. I felt fear as Colin and I were always together and my older brothers were close. I was scared and worried about who I was going to play with or sleep with. We had just lost our grandmother. I was fully aware what death meant. I knew I was never going to see him again. Many emotions were running through my mind, but we had a truly fantastic Christmas together.
Yeah.
You spent that Christmas giving everything that you could to Colin.
Yeah.
And he died at home on the 13th of January,
Yeah, he did.
1990, aged just 7 years old.
Yeah.
Paul, could we just have up on screen, please, 1523004? This certifies the causes of Colin's death. And if we go towards the bottom of the page, please, Paul. If you keep going down, please. Thank you. Certified cause of death. Disease or condition directly leading to death, PCP pneumonia. Other disease or condition leading to that, AIDS due to contaminated factor VIII infusion. Other disease or condition leading to that, haemophilia. You've said in your statement, Janet, that the devastation of having your child on your lap, watching the rise and fall of his chest and waiting for it to stop, is absolutely heartbreaking.
It was.
You didn't, in fact, have problems with funeral arrangements. You said there was a brilliant funeral director.
It was, yeah.
And the staff from the ward came to the funeral because they'd loved Colin.
They did, on the ward itself.
After Colin's death, life fell apart for you both. Janet, can you describe that time?
Well, when Colin died, we couldn't talk about it. If I went into the room, Colin would walk out, or vice versa. There was just this silence, you know, the kids walking on eggshells. And it was horrendous, and it all came to head, really. The first Christmas that we didn't have Colin, and I can remember arguing, and I picked up a bottle of drink. I don't drink. I'm literally teetotal. I don't drink. I picked up a bottle and was going out of the house. I was going to get in the car, drink it, and just crash into a wall. And my other kids were screaming, "Mummy, Mummy, don't go, please." And that brought me back. It brought us back, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because we realised then those kids needed us.
I think we were mourning at different times. As Jan had a good day, I was having a bad day, vice versa.
We never talked
And that's
about
how
it.
it went on.
Couldn't talk about it because protecting each other, I suppose. And so we didn't talk about it with the kids. But they missed him as much as we did, and we didn't realise that.
And Colin, you used to go to the cemetery
Yeah.
and sit there and talk to Colin.
Well, not so much talk as shout, rant and rave at him for the things he'd done to us, put us through. You know, it wasn't his fault, but I always felt better afterwards. So I tend to go to the cemetery on my own at that point.
And you've also said in your statement that you felt suicidal at times.
At times, yeah.
Daniel, as the brother who was the closest in age
Yeah.
to Colin, says in his statement that his world turned completely upside down. And he withdrew into himself a lot. He had shared a room with Colin, and he kept all Colin's things as a shrine to Colin.
It was a shrine. Literally, we weren't allowed to touch anything in that bedroom. Daniel had it all set, and it was his. He's still got all his cars now, and he's got children of his own. They can play with the cars, but only when Daniel's in the room.
And Daniel's told us in his statement that he used to sleep with Colin's clothes so that he could smell him.
Yeah.
Daniel said he eventually had counselling, and that really helped him.
Yeah.
Were you offered counselling, the two of you?
Eventually. Not while Colin was ill or anything like that. It was after his
Years
death.
later, wasn't it?
Daniel's also described the effect on one of his other brothers and how that other brother sometimes would disappear and you'd have to go looking for him and he could be found sobbing on Colin's grave.
Yeah.
You've said, Janet, in your statement that even in more recent years, Daniel still struggled with the absence of Colin in his life.
Yeah.
What was the position when Daniel got married?
Well, he was, excited about getting married, obviously, but he was so upset because he would have wanted Colin to be his best man. So what they'd done is Laura, his wife-to-be, sewed a little something of Colin's in her wedding dress, and Daniel had one of Colin's cars with him because he felt then he was with him.
And you've both described in your statement that Colin remains a huge part of your lives every day.
Talk about him every day. Not sad, not, but the pictures everywhere, the grandkids, they know who Colin is. They never met him, but they just talk about him. It's just natural. It's just a natural thing that he comes up sort of every day, really, in some way or another. And, it was only a few weeks back that my granddaughter, she's 6, she was out in the dining room and she was quiet, so we said, well, where's... We went out there and she's just got her hands and we said, what are you doing? She said, I'm just praying to Colin, and then just ran back out and like it was just a normal thing. I'm just praying to Colin, she said, because there's a picture of him there. And that's just, we don't force it on them or anything like that. It's just the way they are with him.
Is actually a female version of Colin.
Yeah.
She does exactly the same things he used to get up to.
Yeah.
And that brings back a lot of memories.
Yeah.
Because she's quite funny.
And she loves drawing, and things like that. She's got a lot of Colin's mannerisms,
You've said in your statement, Colin, that Christmas is difficult because it's Christmas without Colin and also because it's close to the anniversary of his death.
Yeah.
Well, I hated Christmas because I knew when it was due because Jan always gets depressed. So yeah, for the first 8 or 9 years, if I could have avoided it, I would. But you had younger children, so you had to bite the bullet and pretend everything's fine.
But it's, now it's sort of, we go over to Daniel's because he only lives across the road. We watch the grandchildren open their presents. They all come back to us and we all go straight up the cemetery. That's the first thing we do. And we all take him a little, a lot of people think it's a bit sick that we still take him a card or a little present, but that's our way of dealing with things. And that never stopped. I still get, people think it's really strange, but I still get like a Mother's Day card off Daniel, off little Colin. I still get that now. And I think if he stopped now, I think something's seriously wrong because it's always been the same.
We've got a video to play, but before we play that, is there anything further that either of you would like to say?
Gosh, well, I'd just like to really say is, I don't know where I would have been without Sue, Mark, Tainted Blood, all of those, because without their support, I can just email any one of them and complain or get upset about something, and there is always somebody at the end of Tainted Blood that will answer you, and we still need that. It might be a long time ago, but be lost without them, because that's the only support we get, and that's the only support a lot of us get. And somebody will always answer you. Seconds, somebody is there for you, and that does mean a lot to all of us. Don't know where we'd be otherwise.
Colin?
I've seen a lot of death in my life when I was in the forces, in the Troubles in Ireland, violent and other. But that was training, you could handle that. But there's no training for what was about to be dropped on us with what happened to Colin. There's no way that a child should have to die the way he did. It wasn't pleasant. It still affects us now. And it's not just our son. There's lots of children that have had to go through that. And most of the men campaigning today were actually children when they were infected. So that's something else that needs to be taken into account. I could cope with death, but not with the death of my son. I still have trouble today, the fact that he's in a grave on his own, and the guilt will never go away.
We just need people to recognise that children are infected as well. You're talking about Trelaws, you're talking about Colin and Denise, their little boy Lee, he was only 10. 10. People don't realise just what this thing has done to people. Took lives, maimed people, you know, they're crippled with, you know, such horrible things, you know, and then, you know, when people come on the tainted blood and, you know, there's more devastation. It's always devastation. We need justice. We need something done about this. You know, there's a lot of people who've lost their lives, children, husbands, you know, and it's just so wrong. And I get really angry about it because something needs to be done about this. And thanks to this, we feel now that maybe we're getting somewhere for the first time in all these years.
Just going to ask Mr. Snowden if there's anything further he wants me to ask before we play the video. No. Paul, could we play the video, please?
I've written a poem. I couldn't think of a title, so Gareth loaned it for me, and it's called Today. I will look at this stone and remember many faces are coming to me, and the fun and the joy of just seeing them is a wonderful memory for me. The stone is a symbol of unity, of great strength from one and all. For the wonderful work of the Birch Grove Group, mainly Gareth, Hayden and Paul. And Gareth, my darling, I thank you on behalf of my little boy, for the love and the support that you gave him. You gave him so much joy. You gave him your time and your laughter. You shared in his pain and his tears. You gave him whatever he asked for. You gave him 7 wonderful years. Now this beautiful woodland memorial has brought us all together again. And as we all stand here together, it's time to remember them. But not just those who have gone before us, but the men that continue to fight. The stone is a symbol for all of us. It's solid, steadfast and upright. So when I look at the stone and I remember, and the planting of 1,200 trees, in decades to come the trees will be strong as they grow with our memories.
You didn't really tell the truth there. There was one occasion where I think I gave her the worst night of her life. Colin was Colin. He was very ill. I think he was 6, wasn't he, at the time. So I told Janet to bugger off home and have a break. Went down the local off-licence and bought a couple of cans of lager and a Chinese takeaway. I spent the night with him. We had a drink, we had a Chinese. We watched a few videos. In those days, no DVDs. We had a good night, and I only told Janet this yesterday or the day before. The little Colin talked about AIDS. He knew what was wrong with him. He knew he was dying. And I think it was Colin that gave me the courage, the will to continue this fight. To see him from a newborn baby virtually to die at the age of 7 is something that will stick with me forever. And that's why I'm here. And I think that's why a lot of us are here.
Thank you for your evidence. So,
What you might have expected with an seriously ill child was sympathy and help. what you've described in brutal terms is that what you got was rejection, vilification, and abuse, to the extent that you ultimately could not talk about it to each other. It takes a very special kind of resilience to be able now to talk to everyone about what happened to you, what happened to Colin, and to tell us in the most moving of ways how you have managed to keep Colin alive for you. All I can do is say thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we'll take a slightly longer break after that, 11:30.
Thank you, sir.
11:30.